you're ready, or okay. It's 12:01. I say we get going. Okay. Well, we're going to get going here. My name is Steph Smith. I'm the Senior Associate for the SNAP E&T program at the National Community Action Partnership. You're in the right place if you are tuning in to learn more about offering SNAP E&T services and getting an understanding of what SNAP E&T is and how it can relate to your existing programs. Today, we're going to be joined by some amazing folks at the Seattle Jobs Initiative. They are going to present today's webinar. It's Susan O'Callahan and Bob Thibodeau. This session is being recorded and will be available in a few days for viewing if you were not able to attend live. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Susan and Bob. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Glad you can make it today. If everybody's okay with this, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my my video. I want to make sure that I come in loud and clear. Sometimes my internet and Wi-Fi is a little choppy, so, and also it kind of a distraction for me to see myself talk on camera. So anyways, I'll turn it off, but I will turn it back on during the Q&A session, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. Like Steph said, we're here today to talk about offering SNAP E&T services and really trying to show you how the services that you're providing at your community action agency really fits into SNAP E&T, how they can fit into SNAP E&T and how they align. So I think it's important for you all to realize that you don't have to create a whole new program because you're a SNAP E&T partner. You can always already use what you're already offering as far as programs and services. So you want to go to the next slide, Susan? So this is our agenda for today. We're going to start off with just a quick refresher for SNAP E&T. I know some of this information you already know, but we want to just kind of refresh your memory about what SNAP E&T is and how it works, so they kind of relate and fit into what the rest of what we're going to talk about. Then we're going to cover kind of an overview of what the SNAP E&T components are, and then taking a look at your services and mapping those into SNAP E&T and how they can fit into that program, because we really want you to get the most out of SNAP E&T. And if you know ahead of time how your programs fit into that, then you can get the most out of the what SNAP E&T has to offer as far as getting reimbursement and serving the people that you serve. We'll do also an overview of SNAP E&T participant reimbursements and how important those are for making sure someone's successful in your programs, and how you can provide those services to do that. Then we'll talk a little bit about the employability assessments and how important those are to as part of the case management that goes along with all SNAP E&T components. And then talking about the partnerships and how co-enrollment can really enhance your program, enhance the services that individuals receive when they get services from you. Next slide. So again, just a refresher on SNAP E&T. As you know, all states are required to operate a SNAP E&T program, and they have to submit an annual plan. And it's really important that they get information from providers, from their partner providers, to build that state plan. USDA has committed quite a bit of resources into this program during the last year. That they provided about $550 million to states to run their programs. In FY 2020, SNAP E&T served about 300,000 participants. And then again, states have really a lot of flexibility in designing their E&T programs to fit the needs of their participants, the employers in their state, and the providers that help them provide those services. In addition to the money that the federal government puts into this program, they also commit quite a bit of, as far as staffing and everything. They have the main office, the Office of Employment and Training, near the state, near our nation's capital in Alexandria, Virginia, as well as they have regional analysts that are assigned to the different regions, the 7 different regions of the Food Nutrition Service. So again, there's quite a bit of commitment to this program. The program is going to be around for a long time. There is popularity among both sides of the aisle in Congress for this program. So again, it's here to stay, and it's only getting better with time. Next slide. So this kind of lays out kind of the structure of the program and how the relationship works as far as between FNS, the state, and the third-party partners. Probably another thing we can add in here too for your county administered states, their state supervised county administered, is the local county office that administers the program. But again, it's the state that's primarily responsible for the program, but it's important that they have that cooperation and that collaboration with the different community agencies that help them run the program and provide the services, because they're the experts in workforce development. So that communication between FNS, the state, and the third-party partners is really important to run the program correctly. Next slide. So who's eligible for SNAP E&T? Again, it's folks that are receiving SNAP in the month that they participate in a component. The only exception to that is job retention. If somebody's receiving SNAP E&T and then they become employed, they could actually receive additional services, even though they might lose their SNAP benefit because of the income that they're receiving in the employment. They could get services under the job retention component. Again, they can't be receiving TANF cash assistance in order to participate in SNAP E&T. Then, of course, because the program, the main goal of the program is that the person, get a job at the end of their training or skill development, then it's really important that they're able to work upon completion of the program. There are no time limits, unlike TANF. There's no time limits in SNAP or SNAP E&T. So they can participate as long as it takes for them to gain the skills and everything they need to get a good job. And then states have, again, some flexibility. They can operate a mandatory program or a voluntary program, or a kind of combination of both too. Next slide. So this kind of lays out how the funding works. Again, the funding comes from the federal government. And there's kind of 3 buckets of funding that are in the program. There's the 100% funds, which are, they're formula based. They are capped, so there's only a certain amount. It's about $104 million per year that are divvied out to all 50 states and the territories that run SNAP E&T programs. So it's limited. Again, it's based on how many work registrants the state has, and a subgroup of that is their able-bodied adult population. There is a pot of funds called ABOD pledge funds, and a state can pledge to get some of those funds, pledge to serve at-risk ABODs. And at-risk ABODs are able-bodied adults that are at risk of losing their benefits after 3 months of participating in the SNAP program. So they have certain work requirements they have to do in order to receive more than 3 months. But since most states are under a waiver or are able to grant good cause to their able-bodied adults, there aren't any, I don't believe there's any pledge states right now. Then there's this pot of money called 50-50 funds. These are not capped, and these are funds that are really very flexible in how they can be used. They can be used for administrative cost that the 100% funds aren't able to cover. And they also can be used for participant reimbursements, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on. But again, this is really where the potential is for the program is in the 50-50 funds. Because again, like I said, they're not capped. It's really based on what the state and what their partners can put into the program and what they can get back based on providing those eligible services to eligible participants. Next slide. So this tells you a little bit more about the 100% funds. Again, they can be used to cover staffing and then overall planning and operations of the program. They can be used to pay for direct program expenses, such as case management, tuition, if you're sending somebody to a college that has tuition fees, and then job development expenses. Some of the characteristics, like I said before, they are capped. So a state is allocated a certain amount each year. And then it cannot be used to cover any participant reimbursements, such as transportation or childcare. Next slide. And then the 50-50 reimbursement funds, like I said, there's a lot more flexibility with these funds. They can be used for any of the expenses that you use 100% funds for. It can help, kind of fill in some of those gaps that the 100% funds aren't covering, as well as they're able to be used for the participant reimbursements, which are really important for individual success in the program. And then it does require an upfront investment from either the state or the contracted partner of non-federal funds. And that's the only thing that can be reimbursed through 50-50 is the use of non-federal funds. The provider, invoices those costs to recover the cost of the non-federal dollars that they use to get a federal reimbursement. And then the reimbursement funds, when you get those back, they lose their federal status, so that you can put those back into the program to enhance your program and draw down further reimbursement. So you can kind of recycle those reimbursements to get more out of them. Next slide. So this is kind of the cycle of the way the funding works. Again, the Community Action Agency would provide the E&T services to the participants, and then you're fronting all the costs associated with those. And then you submit to the state agency a list of your costs for reimbursable services and the participant reimbursements. And the state will review those costs and review those expenses and decide on what can be reimbursed. And then the Community Action Agency would receive the 50% reimbursement of those allowable expenses. Again, those are unrestricted, which means you can take those funds and put them back into your program to grow your program, to serve more people, and expand and improve the impact it has on the participants in your program. So now I'm going to turn it over to Susan to go into a little bit more about how your programs can fit into SNAP E&T. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. I too am going to turn off my camera because it's just a little bit easier to focus. I don't like to see myself talk either. I'm going to talk to you. We're going to just go deeper into the service element of SNAP E&T, and as Bob laid it out, we'll talk about how your services kind of map onto SNAP E&T. So this is our awesome Venn diagram that you will see over and over as you participate in this cohort. But it's really great to just show how the different elements of your program sort of come together to kind of make an ideal situation to be a 50-50 third-party partner. And today we're going to focus on the services piece of this. So I'm going to start by showing you what, when we're talking about SNAP E&T and services or activities, they're called components. And this is a list of all of the allowable SNAP E&T components. Sometimes you might hear E&T activities, SNAP E&T services, that you'll hear a lot of language like that to talk about SNAP E&T components. These are described in the SNAP E&T toolkit that's written by FNS, which is largely geared towards showing state agencies how to run SNAP E&T programs, but it's also a really helpful resource for providers and potential providers to understand kind of the policy framework for the program and just the different elements of the program. So at the end of this presentation, I've linked to the SNAP E&T toolkit. But going through these activities, these are on the left-hand column, this is what they're called, and in the right-hand column, that's how they're described. One thing to note in SNAP E&T, and this is a relatively kind of new development out of the 2018 Farm Bill. There's a high emphasis on ensuring that within each of these components, you are providing case management alongside these activities. And really what that gets at is that FNS really wants to see SNAP E&T providers and their state agencies ensuring that somebody is getting supported along the way in these activities. It's not a passive program. It's not a transactional program in the sense where you just sign someone up for an activity and they go do it on their own. They're really getting support to persist through the programs. And, this is done because we understand that the people that are served by this program, sometimes the gaps that are left in other workforce programs, SNAP E&T can really fill for the people who aren't really succeeding in maybe in other workforce programs. So they need additional support to go through these programs. So I'm going to highlight just a couple of these components. You can read through the whole thing at your leisure, but some of the things that we see as being services and activities that are centered on helping somebody be ready to be employed. It could include soft skills training, life skills, other types of curriculum and activities that are really kind of augmenting the technical skills training aspect to help somebody get a job. And then in addition, there's what we call supervised job search. So this again really points back to that case management requirement. Supervised job search means that a participant is getting supported and having kind of a guided process to conduct their job search relative to their employment goals, their skill sets, potentially, ideally what they're maybe training to do. It really is, contrasted to, I think, sometimes what we've seen in the past where somebody just goes and gets online and does, fills out 12 job applications kind of randomly and that they fulfilled a job search requirement. This is very different from that. It's much more specific, supported, and guided. Education is any activities that are actually improving and developing somebody's employability skills. Typically, these are the programs that community colleges could be offering, or other training providers where there's a credential, maybe it's tied to a specific industry, recognized credentials, specific activities that point to employment or specific educational activities. I'm going to skip over workfare again. It is part of the SNAP E&T program. It's not likely that this is going to be something that you would focus on. You can read more about it in the toolkit. Work experience, which includes subsidized work-based learning, which is a brand new element of SNAP E&T. But this is where somebody's participating in a structured on-the-job learning experience that takes place in a workplace environment. And it's for a limited amount of time to lead to unsubsidized employment. One of the new things about this component that SNAP E&T now supports, and in some states that are getting approved for this, is the ability to draw down reimbursement for subsidized wages. There's guidance that's kind of brand new that's coming out of FNS to show programs how they can do this appropriately and fit within FNS's requirements. So we can talk more about that if that's something of interest, if that's something that you might partner with a provider who's doing this. Job retention is the other one I'll just kind of highlight. This is, again, Bob mentioned this, where if you have supported somebody through SNAP E&T, they've participated in SNAP E&T activities, and as a result of those activities, they get a job. That job income makes them ineligible to receive SNAP. They can still receive support, and you can still get reimbursed for the services you offer them while they're in the first months on the job. Typically, we see it can be up to 90 days. Some states have, we know like Washington State applied for a waiver to offer a longer period of job retention. So that is a possibility in some circumstances, but typically we see about a 90-day time frame for this activity. So now I'm going to kind of zero in on what you as a community action agency might be providing and how that maps onto these SNAP E&T components. So we did a little bit of homework trying to create this session for you and looked at your programs and how your programs are described and the activities that you indicate are part of your programs, and have sort of mapped them onto these SNAP E&T components. So in the left-hand column, those are the SNAP E&T components. And then in the right-hand column, these are kind of listed out activities and services provided by community action agencies. So this sort of shows how you would map what you do onto these SNAP E&T components, or what some of the things that you do and what you call them and how they would fit into SNAP E&T components. And I'd ask everybody right now to sit and maybe even reflect on your programs, and even type into the chat if you're interested, think about what you do and how that could align with SNAP E&T. And, you might have to do some thinking about, well, we call it this, but we could call it, this would fit under the education component for SNAP E&T, or supervised job search. Or even if you do some element of this and it's a minor adjustment to kind of add in a service or an element to make it fit within SNAP E&T. And I want to be careful, because we do really, really want to emphasize that, we really want you to be looking at what you do already, what you do well, and how well it aligns with SNAP E&T. This is not necessarily the time to think about how you would do a brand new program and delve into something that you're not you're not good at and you're not already known for in your community to do. So I'll give everybody just a couple minutes to look through this list, and feel free to type into the chat any areas where you think, oh gosh, I'm also just noticing I was lost for a moment. Somebody can give me a heads up that I'm still being heard.
Yes, we can still hear you, Susan. You're good.
Okay.
You're only off for about 10 seconds, Susan.
Okay. So yeah, also, if you have questions as we go through this material, feel free to type it into the chat. We certainly want to make this as interactive as possible. But I will move on if we're not, if there's no comments. And if you do think of, questions, or just, thinking about how your specific program lines up with SNAP E&T, feel free to add it later, or we can talk about it during our question and answer section. So we talked also about participant reimbursements. And again, that's SNAP E&T lingo. You're going to hear it a lot. Basically, what it means is there are those supportive services that are reasonably necessary and directly related to participating in a SNAP E&T program. And states actually have a requirement to ensure that their SNAP E&T participants get those types of services. That would, not having them would be a barrier for them to participate. There's actually some really important things that states have to make sure that they in effect, states can't say, this is a program that we want you to participate in, or you need to participate in, and not offer these services that would make it necessary. So a good example of that would be like transportation. If somebody needed help to get to and from their training site, there would be a requirement to offer that service to them. And what's great about third-party partners is these are services that you often provide to your participants as well. So if you're a SNAP E&T provider, you can start getting reimbursed for these types of services that you offer to your participants. And I listed just some examples. The list is broader. And in fact, FNS really tries to go as broad as they can and really just emphasize this reasonable and necessary requirement. And states have a lot of kind of flexibility to sort of interpret what that means, set some boundaries around those and limits around that. So, what's allowed and how it's allowed will be specific to the state that you're operating in. But these are kind of some general types of services. And again, these are sort of pulled from what we think are typically maybe offered by your agencies, or what you might try to be connecting folks to. One big one is childcare, dependent care. That's a huge barrier for somebody, for a parent, if they're not able to have childcare to participate in a program. Transportation, also huge one. And that could look like bus passes or gas cards. It's pretty flexible. Books and supplies, clothing, uniforms that they might need to participate in a training setting, or even a work-based learning setting. Other like safety items, again, like if they're in a program, like a welding program where they need specific equipment to stay safe while they're in that program. Again, these are services that are, there to help somebody stay active in participating in a SNAP E&T program. So again, mapping these onto what you do, these are listed out, like what community action agencies might be providing already that they could align with SNAP E&T. Some things to consider, and I mentioned this in the last slide, states can put some caps on these. One big one is emergency housing. States get really specific and often very narrow about what that means, but it can be in certain circumstances if somebody is facing an eviction notice or is newly homeless and there's a cost to be in a shelter or some sort of temporary situation. Sometimes SNAP E&T can support those costs for a limited amount of time. Again, like childcare, states often or are encouraged to find, childcare opportunities for their SNAP E&T program. The state of Washington tapped into their TANF funded childcare and made their SNAP E&T participants eligible to tap into that subsidized childcare opportunity. And so there's certain ways that states have tried to make those services available for their SNAP E&T participants. So we talked up front that we would cover a little bit about employability assessment. And the reason why we've put this in here is it's an important aspect of when you begin providing services to your SNAP E&T participants. SNAP E&T participants have to be sort of screened up front for being able to work and being sort of on a track for employment. That there's a responsibility of the state SNAP agency to do that on their end. But it's also something that you need to incorporate into your own SNAP E&T program. And states will have specific kind of requirements. Sometimes they even have their own assessment form that you can use, or just make sure that your process aligns with it. But all of your participants need to undergo some sort of employability assessment to understand what their employment skills are, what their goals are, so that there's really some intentionality around how you're going to support this person and help direct them towards the right employment opportunity for them based on their skills and their needs. It's not an E&T component per se, but it is part of what you can, like the time and effort that goes into that can be part of your SNAP E&T invoice. So it's just something to consider, that you don't really, there's not a component that that lines up with this, but it can be part of kind of your overall programming and efforts that can be reimbursed through SNAP E&T. So, we've gone through how, there's a lot of these SNAP E&T components that are available. States can opt into the types of components that they think are important for their SNAP population. So not all states offer all of those components. That's something to note. We do say that when you're sort of mapping your own program and you provide an element that's really critical for your population that isn't part of the state SNAP E&T program, it's good to be communicating that and seeing where there might be openings for states, including that in their state plan. So it's always good to kind of note. It's just something to also be aware of. And then in addition, you don't have to do the full menu of activities. SNAP E&T is great because you can focus on the pieces that you do well that already align with SNAP E&T, and then you can look to your partners in the community who might be offering services that complement what you do. And one example I would offer is, in my experience at SJI, we ran a program, a career pathways program, where we provided that job search training component. So some of those softer skill elements, as well as case management and navigation services, and participant reimbursements for individuals who are also enrolled at the community college, who was also a SNAP E&T provider. So they were participating in education components through the college while they were participating in the job search training components through us. And that's totally allowable in SNAP E&T. They can be co-enrolled. States will put in some guardrails around making sure that you're not duplicating efforts and services. But that is kind of a way to ensure that your participants have their whole range of needs met, and you don't have to do that all on your own. So I think that's one important element when you're thinking about becoming a SNAP E&T provider and you're looking at what you offer. Also consider what your partners in the community are offering. Some of them might already be SNAP E&T providers, and your participants might benefit from being connected to those services as well. So that's the end of what I have to share. But here are some resources that I mentioned up front. So a lot of the definitions about the SNAP E&T components and lots of good policy information and guidance you can find in the SNAP E&T program toolkit. It's linked on this slide. In addition, FNS has been putting a whole lot of concerted effort in growing SNAP E&T and specifically the 50-50 model over the last 6 years. SJI has been one of their primary technical assistance providers through this SNAP to Skills program. So over the years, we've developed a lot of good, case studies and tools and resources, and that can be helpful and speak to just various topics that might be relevant and of interest. So I encourage everybody to go just peruse what's on the SNAP to Skills website. And that's the end. I do see some questions that are coming in through the chat. So I'm gonna actually turn my camera back on. Mary asked, what strategies can you use to form partnerships with other organizations offering complementary services? That's a really good question. My suggestion would be first to look at where your existing partnerships exist. So if you are already connecting folks to and referring them to different training opportunities, that's where I would say look first. Look at your network currently. Are any of those folks SNAP E&T providers already? If they're not, you can even think about sort of developing a model together that can then sort of you can take up to the state to show how you're combining your efforts to develop this SNAP E&T program. In addition, you could be connecting somebody to those services and even maybe covering some of the costs. So if you're referring someone to a college who isn't a SNAP E&T provider, but they have a program that falls under SNAP E&T, you could be covering those tuition costs if that's a possibility and getting reimbursed on them. There's a lot of different ways, but to Mary's point, I think your initial strategy would be to look at your existing kind of network and your existing partnerships and go from there. Follow up, what are strategies on learning who these other SNAP E&T partners are in your community? There's a few different ways. There's just simply looking at, states do have, they develop these state plans every year. They list out who their partnerships are. A lot of states might have a website for their SNAP E&T program that lists out who the SNAP E&T providers are in the community. But again, I would say, look at who you are connected to already, and just start doing some networking. You may also already have a relationship with your SNAP agency. If that's something that already exists, you can be kind of connecting with your SNAP agency to understand sort of your local SNAP E&T landscape. As we go through this cohort, we'll be giving you kind of some help and assistance on how to sort of go about getting connected and understanding the landscape. Another question, if you offer a service that falls into a component that your state's E&T program doesn't offer, how can you connect with your state agency to see if it's possible to include in the SNAP E&T program? My advice for that would be, you know, when we're working with providers who want to be a SNAP E&T provider and they're not yet, there's, you know, different ways depending on what state they're in connecting with that SNAP E&T program. And, you know, and so when you're going through the process of kind of understanding what you want to offer as a provider, and you see that, you know, for example, maybe you offer job retention services already, and that's not a component that the state offers. You could, you know, and this is just one thing you could do. You could be putting that sort of in a proposed model and say, you know, we're aware that this isn't something that you include in your state plan, but here's how it could really benefit your SNAP population. And we serve, you know, this section of your SNAP population that would really benefit from this component, and we could do it better and enhance it if it was part of your SNAP E&T program. So it's kind of all, you know, but there's some finesse to it, and you have to consider the context in which you're working. What if you primarily only offer supportive services and participant reimbursements? Can you still be a SNAP E&T third-party provider? Yes. Again, that speaks to those partnerships. And, you know, that might be a scenario that's pretty common where you're offering these kind of supportive elements to a participant, and then connecting them to the education piece and the training piece. What you have to consider is that whatever services you're offering, they all have to point to an employment goal. So if you're giving somebody transportation support services and other types of services like that, they have to be connected to a SNAP E&T activity, and all SNAP E&T activities have to point to employment. So that's just something that you have to consider. But again, you don't have to do them all, but somebody has to be doing that, and or what you're doing has to be have a line to an employment goal. Any other questions or comments? I'd be curious, you know, if we have some existing SNAP E&T providers on this webinar to, you know, speak out, maybe speak to your experience or what you offer as a SNAP E&T provider. I can talk all day, but I do not work in a community action agency. And so it's always good to hear from your peers. Hi, Teresa.
I was thinking about you. So we've been a provider for SNAP E&T at TriCap in Minnesota for several years now. And starting out, I think we've learned a lot of lessons. So that's good, because then you all don't have to learn them. Haha. But over time, this program has really shown us how much of an impact that we can have in our community. And we kind of utilize it as, I think we call it like bundled services, like, you know, Cable would say, we're bundling services. So we have existing programs that we've identified that would be a good fit that are non-federal programs. So housing programs and asset programs and workforce programs. And we have worked with those existing programs to identify clients that would, you know, make sense for the program, that meet that basic eligibility. And then we go ahead and talk to the client and we dually enroll them. And so we have kind of started out smaller. And I think that's for us, that was the way to go. Start small and you can build it. And we have some systems in place now that make it really user-friendly for staff. There isn't a lot of extra work. So staff, you know, don't get burned out, which is nice because they're already doing the work. How I say it to staff is, you know, you can talk to your clients about the program like this. You can say, In one of our case management sessions, we may be talking about the employability assessment. And in another session, we might be talking about your housing search. And it's just basically case management, nothing different than usual, right? Except there might be some more robust employment components to the work that we're doing. So in the workforce division, that makes perfect sense for us in the pillar that I work under. For housing and asset, surprisingly, that makes sense as well. Obviously, there are some cases that may not be the perfect fit, but overall, a lot of our clients that are eligible are a good fit and do voluntarily jump onto the program. So I am a champion for this program. I am happy to talk to anyone about the program. I've been overseeing it for several years now as a manager, and I've also provided direct service. So that puts me kind of in a unique position to be able to talk about both the budget aspects of the program and the logistical components, as well as that case management piece, because I've done both. So I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have about, how we operate. That's why we're here in this meeting, to be able to provide that. So.
And Teresa, that's I really like what you had to say about, that who in your programs would qualify for SNAP E&T and benefit. And our next session, we're going to be talking about participants and who they are and what their characteristics are and how they kind of move through the program. And we might be following up with you to talk more about that. So
I would be happy to do that.
One thing I wanted to mention too about as far as if your state is not providing the services that you provide and you want to add that to those services, it's not necessarily because the state is against providing those components. It's just that maybe they haven't found a partner yet that provides those components. So I'm sure most states are going to be very open to as long as the services you're providing fit under one of those components that Susan described, I think they'll be open to adding that to their state plan. The other thing I wanted to mention too was about participant reimbursements. One of the things that we didn't talk about was the possibility for helping somebody out with maybe some self-esteem things, like, if they need to get some dental work done, or, providing eyeglasses, things like that. Those I've seen being very effective in helping somebody, move along and getting the services, the support they need and the skills they need to get that good employment.
Yeah, I think I've experienced and I think we hear this a lot. SNAP E&T allows for the kind of the broadest range of support services or participant reimbursements of any employment program. And it really is about whatever that person needs to continue their participation and to move forward. And so, and there's a lot of gray area. So if it's something that looks questionable or you're not sure, it's like, as you become a provider, there's always kind of room to engage with your SNAP agency about whether this fits in. And typically the SNAP agencies want to see that definition as broad as possible as well. So, kind of start with what's sort of obvious and easy. And as you get more established, you can think more creatively about what your participants need. And what we've seen is that, state SNAP agencies or county SNAP agencies are really on board with that, exploring what's possible as well.
I think if you compare the previous version of the toolkit with the current one, you'll see that what's missing is that chart that used to be in the old one of, what's allowable and what's not allowable as far as participant reimbursements. They really left it a lot more open and a lot more flexible.
I think another point, and maybe we'll be diving into this more at, future sessions, is that we have also taken a pretty I guess, conservative approach to the choices that we use for our activities. So we didn't start with like, oh, we're just going to do everything because we're not equipped to do everything. So we're equipped and doing right now some of those basic components of work readiness, which we're already doing with our clients anyway, and providing that education. I guess it used to be called non-credentialed training, where we would provide in-house curriculum around life skills, like you mentioned earlier, life skills kinds of things, and job readiness coaching and curriculum. And then we also, of course, are providing employability assessments, but the self-sufficiency matrix. And I know a lot of community action programs are using the self-sufficiency matrix. I know in the state of Minnesota, they're really flexible about the types of assessments that we can choose. So we get to choose the ones that make the most sense for clients. So I think the nice piece is, number one, we have a really good connection with the state to be able to go back and ask questions about the program. And they're very responsive, and we're also able to kind of keep those activities limited at the beginning, and then again, build it as we go. So there are service providers that have been doing this a long time in the state, and they are doing many more components than us, but that's okay. We are doing the components that make the most sense for us within our agency at this time. So hopefully that helps a little bit too for people that are looking at this as an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Teresa, and something that I would add, this isn't a competitive process. So states are looking to really just create that web of services. And the 50-50 reimbursement model, as Bob pointed out, that money isn't capped. So you don't have to think about like how you have to sort of clamor for something that somebody else might be at an advantage of getting if they're a bigger agency or offer more. It's really about the states looking into their communities to see what's already working well for the populations that they're interested in supporting, and then enhancing it with that 50-50 model. But it's your investments, and so you invest at the level that you're able to do. So you can kind of think about it that way, rather than like, we're going to go apply for this grant that 50 other providers are applying for. And states select based on what's good and effective for that community, not how to dole out a limited amount of money. This is a very different way to think about it.
Questions for Bob and Susan? But Teresa, I will be wink wink reaching out for next the December 2nd webinar. I think you would be the ideal example to kind of share with your peers kind of what your approach was. So check your inbox. But Bob and Susan, this has been amazing. I know sometimes if we're new to an E&T program, it's hard to even know what you want to ask, what questions you don't know or all that. So I think kind of as we chug along, folks will start, oh, okay, I should be asking that question, or, oh, that's a great question. I have the same question. So don't worry about not having questions at the moment. I'm sure as we get rolling, you'll have plenty. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll field those and get answers back. This session has been recorded, and so we will make that recording available to you all, plus the folks who were not able to attend. And we'll also include the slides because those were very, very helpful. But with that said, we have a few minutes. Ask another question, or we can kind of call it there. it's your cohort, so I'll let you do what you want.
While everyone's thinking about it, if they have questions, I will say, just to tee it up, you know, going back to that Venn diagram, we're going to move through that whole Venn diagram in these next sessions. So we'll talk about participants, we'll talk about capacity, and we'll talk about funds. So we're going to kind of use this similar format to go through all of those topics.
You won't want to miss it.
All right. Okay, well, I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you again, Bob and Susan. You guys are always amazing, and we'll be following up with everyone.
Steph, thanks everyone.
All right, take care.
Everybody.